When Harry Potter meets the world of Cthulhu. When scientific thinking collides with magical theories. When P.S. There is no CP or love line in this article. Friends who like this book can join the group chat 514105437 to exchange writing ideas, or roast about real life to release pressure. Keywords of the novel. Harry Potter and the Old Lord without a pop-up window. Complete download of Harry Potter and the Old Lord TXT, latest chapter reading of Harry Potter and the Old Lord. Chapter 1. Traversing and Sudden Death. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Crossing and Sudden Death. Wu Mumming was awakened by the cold. The previous moment was still in the flames of the laboratory explosion, and now it has been frozen awake. Just like every starting male lead, he wakes up in an orphanage. But he is even more miserable. He woke up in the grocery room of the orphanage. Apart from the muddy floor and dust floating in the air, only wooden barrels emitting a musty smell and mops with black fungus accompanied him. Wu Mumming made a stiff attempt to move his fingers, feeling as if he had been ground by a meat grinder. The pain spread from the deepest part of his soul to his whole body, causing him to tremble. A large amount of air filled with mold and dust poured into his lungs. Wu Mumming coughed and greedily breathed in the air, feeling the feeling of his body slowly warming up. Accompanied by rapid breathing and intense coughing, there were countless fragmented memories that flooded his brain. Wu Mumming was originally a great young man of the 21st century. While staying up late to do experiments, he happened to encounter an explosion in the laboratory upstairs. He didn't die in the explosion, but the explosion collapsed the floor and a 1-ton ultra-low-temperature refrigerator fell into the air. Wu Mumming died suddenly on the spot. It doesn't even hurt. The dead thief is peaceful. Then he woke up in this grocery room. Interestingly, this body is also known as Wu Mumming, also known as Tierra Wu in English. Like him, it was born on June 28, 1980 and has the same parents and appearance. But the only difference is that the parents of Wu Mumming immigrated to England in the 1980s with unrealistic foreign dreams. A week after the plane landed, it was shot and killed in a dark alley next to the theater. It's really miserable. Tierra here was also directly sent to an orphanage and died of hypothermia at night an hour ago. The discrimination against Chinese people was still quite severe in the 1980s. This discrimination is reflected in all aspects, including schools, institutions, government agencies, restaurants, and of course, orphanages. And sometimes, this kind of discrimination between young children is even worse and more blatant. Among a group of orphans with blonde hair and blue eyes, you are the only one with black hair and black eyes. If you don't bully me, who will you bully? From the earliest small things, being robbed of food and toys, to being picked up, being pushed and beaten, and now being mischievously doused with cold water and locked into a storage room. Tierra Wu, who was already in poor health, died of hypothermia at night. After lying on the ground and relaxing for a while, Tierra slowly sat up, her right hand slowly resting on her left wrist, silently counting for 60 seconds. There's no problem with the heartbeat. In her previous life, Tierra majored in biology and medicine in college. Although she was not a pure medical student, she still knew some simple medical methods. After taking her pulse, Tierra realized that there was a ring on the ring finger of her left hand that clearly didn't match her current identity. There were no windows in the miscellaneous room, the door was tightly closed, and now it was time to turn off the lights again. The surroundings were pitch black, and Tierra had to grope with her right hand. This ring feels a bit like it's carved from some kind of bone. The ring was a circle larger than his ring finger, with uneven surfaces that seemed to have carved some patterns, densely covering the entire ring. In the darkness, other human feelings will be magnified. After touching back and forth for 2 times, Tierra was able to barely recognize these patterns that were not usually noticed, as if they were extremely distorted English words. Th Mare. L. Eas. Gol. La ei. Lin. Tyra tried to pronounce these words based on the spacing between these patterns and the English pronunciation. After the last syllable blurted out, Tiara, who was among the clutter, suddenly disappeared, as if she had been wiped away by an eraser. In the next moment, Tiara's eyes lit up and she appeared in a dimly lit library. Nausea, although Taya's stomach was empty and wild, she couldn't help but retch, as if she had been on a roller coaster for 5 hours just now. Tiara lay weakly on the ground like a dead dog, and only when this feeling subsided a little did he roll over and lie on the ground with his face flushed. What Tiara saw was a very far and wide ceiling, with neatly adjusted stone walls below, shrinking in circles. Even at the bottom where Tiara was located, it was nearly 500 square meters in size. It is an inverted pyramid-shaped building, roughly estimated to have at least 1,000 floors, each of which is only half the height of a person, and each floor is hollowed out. Inside, there are all kinds of books and paper rolls stuffed haphazardly. After regaining some strength, Tiara sat up and saw a very rudimentary wooden table standing next to him. On the table was a pile of rolls of parchment and a lamp made of strange stones. Tiara slowly crawled towards the wooden table and sat down on the wooden chair in front of it. The parchment on the table was piled up in a very messy manner, and even a few pieces were torn and crumpled into paper balls. Tyra picked up a piece of parchment casually, which was filled with a dense and twisted text that looked a bit like English, but not exactly the same. After staring at it for a while, Tyra felt dizzy. However, when his fingers touched these words, a chilling message flooded into his brain. In all universes and all living beings, except for those deities and descendants personally bred by the Supreme Mother, there is no living creature that can match. Tiara was so scared that she quickly took her hand away. Then he went to touch another sheepskin roll with his fingers. Mango that has been hit by thunderstorms, peeled, sun-dried, crushed, take 2 spoonfuls. Tiara stared at those distorted words. He can be certain that he absolutely does not recognize these words, but when his fingers touch these words, the knowledge represented by these words automatically enters his brain. After looking at a few pieces of parchment, Tyra had a vague idea and walked towards the nearest cave with a heavy face. Tyra's hand carefully brushed over the spine of those books, and one title after another filled with a sense of blasphemy and evil flowed into his mind. The largest and thickest book. The Book of the Dead, a thinner one, like a regular textbook. The Book of Unnamed Sacrifice, thin and tall, wrapped in an unknown hard shell, a thin book, sewn together with cotton thread like an ancient Chinese book. The 7 Chapters of Xianjun. Whoosh, that ancient book flew out of the bookshelf and fell in front of Tai Lamy and Noodles, and the pages of the book unfolded automatically in front of Tai Lamy and Noodles without wind. At this moment, Tiara never felt that Chinese characters were so terrifying and disgusting. He knew every word on it, and the moment his gaze met the 2 pages of Chinese characters made Tiara's hair stand up, as if some incomprehensible knowledge was forced into his soul. Chaotic babbling, screams, and incomprehensible images filled his brain. One by one, goosebumps appeared all over the body, and they grew bigger and bigger, crowded and growing into semi-transparent, sticky pustules. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Merlin. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Merlin. Suddenly everything disappeared and everything returned to calm. The mutation disappears. Crazy babbling and screams disappear. The incomprehensible image disappears. The scene inside the library seems to have been switched to another scene by a skilled editor. Tiara still maintained the posture of touching the spine of the book with her fingers, pointing directly at the Lalil text in the previous book of the Xianjun 7 Chapters Secret Classic. Tiara was stunned for a few seconds, then withdrew her fingers from the bookshelf as if she had been scalded by a hot soldering iron. Without looking back, she moved away from the bookshelf and sat back in front of the desk, her gaze somewhat dazed as she collapsed on the stone steps. He remembers everything just now very clearly. Suddenly flying out of the bookshelf, the Xianjun 7 Chapters Secret Scriptures were accompanied by crazy babbling, incomprehensible visuals, and terrifying mutations in the body. Suddenly, everything returned to a few seconds ago, when his fingers had not yet touched the Xianjun 7 chapters secret classic. Tyra gasped heavily and lifted her left hand to wipe away a cold sweat. My hand. Tyra's left hand was originally left with only pure white bones in the area of his little thumb. Although these few phalanges could bend freely according to his will, it was obvious that his recent turnaround was not entirely without cost. Tyra let out a deep breath. What worries him the most is that it has happened. He did indeed travel through time. Not only that, he also crossed to the world of Cthulhu. Just now he read those few parchments and felt a little confused about the words, Supreme Mother God, Dream God, Crazy Gemini, and so on inside. Now he can be certain. This is really dangerous, Tiara couldn't help but chuckle bitterly. I thought it was some kind of urban warrior or business overlord who came through, but I didn't think it was Cthulhu's worldview, so I had to be honest. Speaking of this, Tiara was momentarily stunned. It seems like something suddenly came out of his mind. It's some purest skill. Just as if he had rehearsed this skill thousands of times, it was a skill that moved according to his heart and was about to emerge. Tiara raised her finger slightly in mid-air. A black, hair-like fine thread grew out of the crevices of his nails, getting longer and longer. When the fine thread grew to 10 centimeters long, it suddenly crawled out of his fingernail crevices and landed lightly on the wooden table. As this strand of hair fell off, Tyra felt light all over, and the mental dizziness and discomfort, as well as the new and old scars he had been beaten up on before crossing over, disappeared. Apart from his still hungry stomach, his current physical condition can be considered healthy. But as the black filaments fell off, Wu Mumming's mental dizziness disappeared, but there was a feeling of lethargy. This skill is called Curse Worm. At the same time, he also acquired another skill called Communication Star Sea Master. Curse worms can condense damage, diseases, and curses from themselves or others into a worm with half a living characteristic. It is best to implant this worm into other living organisms within 24 hours, otherwise it will return to itself. This cursed worm cannot transfer physical hunger, fatigue, and mental lethargy. That is to say, the cursed worm can only transfer the excess or necrotic parts of its own body. Another way to communicate with the Lord of the Starry Sea is to capture some rituals and project one's soul into a designated Starry Sea, allowing oneself to gain extraordinary magic. Of course, doing so is almost entirely dedicating oneself to an unknown evil existence in the starry sky. In Cthulhu's world, the stronger the power, the stronger the danger. Communicating with the Lord of the Star Sea can make people become gods on the spot, but at the same time, it can also lead to sudden death on the spot. Just like Tiara just now, if it weren't for that unknown power, he might have now become a bunch of empty and powerless cell blocks. Tiara decided not to wander aimlessly, but instead turned her attention to the rolls of parchment paper. The books inside those grottos are really too dangerous. Although these parchment may also record taboo knowledge, the probability of him dying from reading parchment is much lower than directly reading those books. But he couldn't help but read it. What was even more terrifying than that knowledge was not knowing anything, which could indicate when he would break the taboo and not be aware of it. And through the random reading just now, he guessed that it should be something like the research log of the former owner of this library. However, for safety reasons, Tiara did not read the entire piece, and each piece of parchment only read the beginning and ending paragraphs. After confirming that there was no danger, she only read the middle part bit by bit. This greatly slowed down Tiara's reading speed. Some parchments he just glanced at the beginning and passed them off directly, not because there may be danger, but because the beginning of those parchments is something like experimental records. As a science student, he still has this judgment. He is not in a hurry to look at the previous owner's experimental records, but needs to figure out exactly where this is and what taboos are, so as not to accidentally overturn the car again. About 4 or 5 hours had passed, and it was only then that Tiara finished reading 7 sheets of parchment in full, but he basically understood what was going on. The former owner of this library was named Merlin. Yes, it's the legendary greatest wizard in England, Merlin. But this library was not built by Merlin. Merlin, like him, was also an outsider. Back then, he was just an ordinary rural boy. When he was herding sheep, he accidentally fell into a valley. As the saying goes, if you don't die in a great disaster, there will always be good fortune, and there will always be secrets under the cliff. While searching for a way out, Merlin discovered this inverted pyramid-shaped building and entered the library from above. From then on, a legendary wizard was born, and this ring was refined by Merlin after he became famous. It is a space gate ring. When Merlin was over 600 years old, he moved the inverted pyramid library located in a valley in England to a planet similar to Earth tens of thousands of light-years away, and refined this space gate ring. As long as he holds the ring and recites the incantation hidden in the ring inscription, he can travel to this library. According to Merlin's later research, he believed that the builders of this library should be the great race of Isis, one of the earliest libraries they established while still living on Earth, to store dangerous knowledge from great beings in the universe. Most of the books here also come from the great Isis race, with only a small portion coming from Merlin's own collection. For example, the few higher wave stone slabs placed in the third layer of the cave, and when printing was just emerging, he directly moved a complete set of hardcover printed magic textbooks. However, of course, these books are Merlin's simple collectibles, and Merlin's magical expertise at the time did not require reading these beginners' materials. That set of books was completely brand new. Merlin had never flipped through them, neatly placed in the cave facing the wooden table, covered in dust. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Magic Blessings. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Magic Blessings. This library was completely hollowed out with a black stone and gradually chiseled out. The hardness of the stone itself is not very high, but it is incredible that it can isolate the prying eyes of most former rulers outside of the outer gods. As long as there is no active connection, the external gods cannot have any influence on any living creatures inside the stone. That's also why the great race of Isis chose to build this library inside this stone, which contains almost all the dangerous knowledge in the universe. According to Merlin's records, this stone belonged to another native species on Earth at that time, a type of intelligent crustacean higher life similar to upright crabs. After the greatest race discovered the wonders of this stone, the two sides jointly established this library. But because the indigenous people on Earth at that time did not have the same extensive knowledge as the great Isis race, this joint museum was blessed with 3 magical blessings by the great Isis race. One is called knowledge, and every intelligent life visiting this place can face knowledge directly through words. One type is called time, where every intelligent being who has visited this place has the same number of opportunities as their own single-handed fingers to avoid madness. There is also a kind called sacredness, which comes from the sublimation of the specificity of the stone itself, and any contaminated spirit cannot enter this library. These are 3 great spells that have not dissipated even after countless years of trials and tribulations. And the reason for setting it this way because at that time, the greatest race possessed a race with 7 fingers. Their ally, a crustacean creature resembling an upright crab, had pliers on both hands, making it 2 fingers. Their mortal enemy, the flying worm, had no finger at all. However, even so, it cannot completely eliminate the influence from indescribable existence. Some exist independently of the 4th dimension, far beyond the limits of human understanding. These 2 magical blessings, according to Merlin's speculation, may have been used by the great Isis race to overcome research difficulties. Whenever a study falls into a dead end, the great Isis race sets up a ritual outside the library to come into contact with a great existence in the universe, most often the incarnation of one of the 3 pillars of the god, Yugasothos. Tavul-Yatem. This external deity, representing the benevolent side of Yugasothos, sits on a giant stone pedestal behind the first silver key gate in the ultimate abyss of the universe. He is willing to bestow endless knowledge upon any creature that can pass through the Silver Key Gate, as long as they can withstand the weight of that knowledge. When the researchers of the Great Isis race are driven crazy by the incarnation of the One Thing and go back in time, their souls will always leave behind a large amount of knowledge that they can accept. Just like when Tierra was touched by the external god corresponding to the Xianjun 7 chapters secret scripture, he left 2 magical imprints in his soul. This kind of magical blessing called time can be saved except for facing Asatos and the 3 pillars god directly, or passionately confronting the old rulers of death and other levels of external gods. In the eyes of the greatest race's academic elites, this ability is meant to further explore the truth of the world, rather than to save lives in the hands of former rulers. Unfortunately, Tierra just wasted one opportunity like this. However, Merlin is much more reckless than Tierra. At any rate, Tierra came from the modern society. She passed the postgraduate examination in her last university and was familiar with the myth of Cthulhu, so she only wasted one opportunity. At the beginning, Merlin lost 3 fingers. By the time he truly understood what all this meant, it was already too late. This also led to Merlin, the famous great mage, suffering from extremely severe mental pollution from external gods in his later years, to the extent that he seemed to have completely transformed into another person, another crazy, cruel, and unreasonable humanoid monster. He wrote down the content on the parchment that Tierra is currently holding in his hand during the last sober moment as Merlin. A wise man who does not belong to this time and space, a traveler from another world, I prophesied your arrival. I will do my best to stay awake and write the following text. Don't waste all your 5 opportunities. Don't try to connect with the Great Isis race, at least until you are on the same latitude as them. You can choose the Supreme Mother Goddess. If possible, please come to me. I have placed my coordinates on the 3rd shelf on the 4th floor, but please do not attempt it lightly until you obtain the divine dimension. If I proactively contact you, hide in the library, I can't get in. After reading this passage, Tierra silently clasped her hands together. I hope everyone is okay. Don't contact me if you have anything to do. Tierra rummaged through a few more parchment sheets, this time not just looking at the beginning, but reading the entire text. Since Merlin prophesied his arrival, with the mental state in which Merlin was able to enter this library at that time, he should not have left any deceitful things in his notes. At least from this perspective, he can read with confidence. It has to be said that the notes of a great magician are quite helpful for beginners like him who are new to magic, especially Merlin himself, who has grown from a farmer boy who doesn't know a single character to a generation of great magicians. From how to guide his magic at the beginning to the essence of magic, he can almost be said to have covered all aspects. Tierra stared at the parchment on her hand. Uja Dili, you are, Osalia. Tyra silently recited a spell in her mind, while gently releasing the parchment with both hands. The parchment seemed to pause in the air and drift down. This is the floating spell recorded in Merlin's diary, the simplest and most suitable spell for beginners to use to guide their own magic. Although Tierra had previously successfully cast the curse worm belonged to the instinct engraved on the soul by external gods. Before he learned to guide his own magic, the power of the curse worm came from his spiritual power, rather than relying on his own magic. Therefore, he also needs a simple magic to guide his own magical power. Uja Dili, you are, Osalia. This time, Tierra read aloud. The parchment in his hand seemed to have a tendency to break free upwards, but it still fell off even after Tierra reached out. After about 40 or 50 attempts, the parchment in Tierra's hand finally trembled and floated in mid-air. But after more than 10 seconds, the parchment quickly fell down. And Tierra also felt a shiver all over her body, as if she was exhausted and collapsed on the chair. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Leaving. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Leaving. After successfully guiding her magic, Tierra did not continue to stay in this library. She simply flipped through the drawers of the wooden table, took out a slightly heavy stone cone, and then recited the spell on the ring according to Merlin's notes, returning to the small miscellaneous room in the orphanage. Tirabi, who successfully guided his own magic and established contact with the external gods, came much better. After this return trip, he only felt dizzy and did not feel nauseous. Tyra was locked in the miscellaneous room around 9:30 p.m. During the time when the nun finished checking her bed and performing pre-bedtime worship, Tyra was pulled out of her warm bed by a few mischievous children, poured a bucket of cold water, and locked in the miscellaneous room. I don't know how long he stayed before waking up, but the faint blue and white light that leaked through the crack in the door of the miscellaneous room could estimate that it should be around 4 or 5 in the morning, when the sun had just risen. Tyala picked up the stone cone and smashed it hard on the door lock in the miscellaneous room. Once both parties 3 times, bang. Tyala only smashed 3 times before leaving a hole in the decaying and disrepair wooden door. Tiara tiptoed out of the miscellaneous room. The current time is 4:26, and the miscellaneous room is located under the stairs on the first floor of the orphanage. Turning outward is the reception hall of the orphanage, where an old clock hangs on the wall. At this time, both the nuns and the orphans were still asleep in their dreams, which was a good time for him to leave. Yes, leave. Although this orphanage has food, drink, and shelter, it also means confinement. He cannot practice magic recklessly, as untrained magic apprentices without a mentor are at great risk of losing control when using magic. Mild cases may only damage some cabinets and furniture, while severe cases may directly trigger an uncontrollable fire, which is no less than a catastrophic disaster for orphanages that are already not wealthy. It is unknown how many children will end up on the streets. Although Tiara may not have a favorable impression of this orphanage, she cannot make hundreds of orphans homeless by practicing magic alone. But he couldn't give up magic. After being an ordinary person for over 20 years in his previous life, how could he possibly give up the extraordinary power he had, even though this path was dangerous and crazy? And now he is just an orphan, unlike his parents in his previous life who were both well off. In this unfamiliar capitalist country, even if he has the knowledge he had in his previous life, attending a community university here is still a top priority. He has no confidence in making up for the exorbitant tuition fees of public universities for him. As the saying goes, how to pursue the truth of the universe without breaking or standing, without letting go of a comfortable life. Anyway, he has the library located on a different planet, so at least he doesn't need to worry about accommodation when he leaves the orphanage in the short term. And not all the books are in that library, there are also many items and instruments that Merlin brought in from the outside. Just like the inconspicuous stone pyramid he used to smash open the wooden door in the miscellaneous room just now, it was a divine stone picked up by Merlin from the Celtic Holy Land, Avalon. It was a key item for the Celts to promote themselves to druids, engrave natural emblems on themselves, and complete the transformation in sublimation. Used by Tyara to smash the door. Tiara found a blood-red gemstone, which was the philosopher's stone that Merlin had failed to refine. A wooden staff that is over half a person tall, also from Avalon, is a branch of the Celtic tree. It was an early staff of Merlin, but it was rarely used except for certain special rituals after Merlin became a great wizard. As well as some other miscellaneous things, Tiara is preparing to slowly distinguish them in the future. In addition to these magical items, Wu-Mumming also found 3 cowhide bags in the 3rd drawer of the wooden table, which were filled with various gold, silver, and copper coins from Merlin's era, which was in the 11th and 12th centuries, and all of them were considered antiques. Pawning them in a pawn shop could bring him a lot of economic benefits, which should be enough for him to persist for a long time. Tiara returned to her room and gently pushed open the door. She saw her other roommates sleeping soundly, so she tiptoed in and quietly tidied up her clothes, flyers, bedding, as well as the notebooks, pens, and ink provided by the orphanage. They were then sent in batches to the alien library for temporary storage until she found a stable place to settle in this world before taking them out. Then he casually threw the cursed worm onto one of his sleeping roommates who had bullied him, and Tiella tiptoed around and looted all of his roommate's small savings. Although the orphanage is poor, the bad kids there always have a way to get some money from the fundraising box. Although Tiara in this world is still young, she is very observant and naturally discovers where her roommates have put all the stolen money. Tiara dug up a total of £40 from under the drawer, under the child's insole, and inside the book compartment, which should be enough for him to deal with for a while. After all, Tiara dared not stay in the library for long, although under normal circumstances the consciousness of the outer gods could not penetrate the eerie stones that make up the library. But the sacred magic of stones is not 100% safe. According to Merlin's records, people are most spiritually active during sleep and are extremely susceptible to external influences. It is very likely that without one's knowledge, one has connected with an external deity through a certain ancient book. Tidila, who had packed her things, didn't disturb anyone and went to the kitchen to get some bread and milk. She resolutely flipped through the door of the orphanage. "From now on, I will be a wandering mage," Tyra chuckled self-deprecatingly, looking back at the orphanage and the rusty, Wolves Orphanage sign above the orphanage gate in the dim morning light. At that moment, Tiara had the urge to run back and understood that he was facing a life of turmoil that even adults could not bear. Although he has a mature soul and hundreds of ways to make money from the future, he himself is only a 6-year-old child, which limits many of his means. Sigh. Tiara walked towards the bus stop heading towards the city center without looking back. Although the orphanage is very poor, there is still a fundraising box in the nearby church. Tiara smashed it with a black stone, twice, 3 times. I borrowed the money from the fundraising box again. Relying on the remaining memories of the world Tiola knew that there was a pawn shop next to the theater where his parents were shot in the city center. Without money, everything is difficult. First, go exchange some money, eat something good, and then consider future things. Tiara, who had almost stayed up all night, is now extremely exhausted both mentally and physically, and needs to replenish her energy well. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Helis Pharmaceuticals and Enrollment Letters. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Helis Pharmaceuticals and Enrollment Letters. In May 1991, a mottled owl flew over the city of London with a letter in its mouth. At the same time, in a dilapidated attic in the old town of London, an 11-year-old Chinese boy was taking notes with a serious expression on his face. The boy, wearing black gloves, gently pressed his left hand against the old and yellowed parchment, while his other hand swiftly wrote and drew some very complex geometric shapes on another blank parchment. After about 30 minutes, the Chinese-American boy finished his last stroke and gently leaned back on the seat, picking up a bottle of light blue liquid placed by the table and drinking it all in one gulp. The Chinese-American boy, or Tiola, was almost stimulated by the pungent smell of the light blue liquid and vomited, but fortunately he covered his mouth in time and forced himself to swallow it. In the moment when the blue liquid poured down his stomach, Tiara felt as if he had returned to the night of the laboratory explosion. The heavy ultra-low temperature refrigerator fell into the air, and a huge shadow pressed down on him. The short 4 seconds of death seemed to be stretched to eternity, the dull pain of the refrigerator hitting him, the excruciating pain of the skull being crushed inch by inch, tormenting him frame by frame. I don't know how long it took, but Tyra woke up in a cold sweat from the torment of hell, but his spirit was incredibly uplifted, as if he had woken up after a long and comfortable sleep. The thought of continuing to drink in the future makes me feel hopeless. Tiara sighed and helped up the chair he had kicked over while drinking medicine. She went downstairs to the bathroom to take a hot shower. The potion that Tiara just drank is called the Helis potion, which is one of the research findings in Merlin's diary. It can enhance mental power, and the remaining medicinal properties can build a temporary spiritual barrier for the user for about a month, effectively reducing the probability of accidental alignment with the old ruler's mind while learning forbidden spells. Of course, the side effects are also quite obvious. Within 10 to half an hour of taking the medication, the user will experience the most painful experience of their lifetime and time again. For Tierra, it was naturally the experience of being crushed to death by an freezer under an explosion. Although he didn't feel much at the time, this pain was still recorded by his subconscious and erupted in the illusion caused by the Horus potion. After taking a shower, Tierra lay soft on the bed. After taking a break, go learn the next magic. He only has one short day per week to learn magic completely unaffected, so he must seize the time. It has been 5 years since he left the orphanage. Although he was carrying a huge sum of ancient coins, Tierra cautiously only took out a few pawns in exchange for enough money to live for nearly 1 or 2 months. After that, he was preparing to find a job. It's not easy for a 6-year-old child to find a job. Either they refuse him directly, or there are malicious people who want to sell him into some underground places. Tierra, who had no job for a long time, had to learn from other homeless children on the streets of London to do some petty theft. However, this situation quickly changed. During a theft, she was stopped by a Chinese aunt who couldn't speak English. After discovering that Tiola spoke English much better than her husband's fluent English, this kind-hearted and chubby Chinese aunt offered Tiola a job as a cashier at her restaurant. Free meals and accommodations, working 6 days off and 1 day off, earning a monthly salary of £20. My usual job is to sit at the cashier and translate what dishes guests need. When I am busy, I may go to the kitchen to help. The attic in this old city area was originally owned by a friend of hers. After her friend returned to her country, she temporarily took care of it, and even if it was empty, it happened to be arranged for Tierra to stay here. Most of the salary Tierra earned was saved by herself. It didn't even cost much to brew Helis potion. After all, this library is not just a library, it is also located on a planet similar to the ecological environment of Earth. Merlin has opened up more than 10 acres of herbal fields around the entrance of the library. Although Merlin has been away for nearly 500 to 600 years, most of the herbs have grown wildly like wild grass due to the suitable climate here. Tierra easily gathered most of the ingredients for making Hercules potions with the help of the complete solution to magical herbs found on the 3rd shelf, and the remaining small part was also gathered at the traditional Chinese medicine store in Chinatown. Knock, knock, knock. Just as Tierra was about to get up and learn another magic, there seemed to be a sound of knocking on the glass in his ear. A few seconds later, he saw a mottled owl carrying a piece of paper and landing in front of his skylight, tapping the glass 3 times with its short beak. Knock, 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 shouldn't it be? Tierra thought of some possibility and was so excited that she flipped down from the bed. She hurriedly picked up the iron rod and pushed the skylight open. The mottled owl flew in and placed the letter on Tierra's desk, then stood alone on the back of the chair to tidy up its feathers. Tierra picked up the thin envelope, with a white background and a red stamp. His name and address were written on the back in emerald green ink. On the front, there was a wax seal, a shield emblem, and a lion, a snake, an eagle, and a bald man surrounded by the capital letter H. Tierra was a bit excited as she laid the envelope flat and carefully used a paper cutter to cut off the part where the lacquer and letter had been removed, removing the entire piece of lacquer. Tierra took out the letter paper from the envelope, which still had a pungent ink smell, and read it carefully, word by word. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Principal. Albus Dumbledore. President of the International Federation of Witchcraft and Wizardry, President of the Wizardry Association, and First-Class Magician of the Merlin Order, dear Mr. Wu. We are pleased to inform you that you have been granted permission to attend Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find attached a list of required books and equipment. The semester is scheduled to start on September 1st. We will be waiting for your owl to bring you a reply before July 31st. Vice Principal, Female, Dear Maliva McGonagall, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Uniform, 1st grade freshmen need to 1. 3 sets of plain work robes, black, 2. A plain pointed hat for daytime wear, black, 3. A pair of protective gloves, made of dragon leather or similar materials. 4. A winter cloak, black, silver buckle. Please note that all student clothing must be adorned with a name tag. Textbook. All students are required to prepare the following books. Standard Spell, Beginner, by Miranda Gosshack. The History of Magic, written by Bashida Bashar. The Theory of Magic, by Ade Beverlin. A Guide to Metamorphosis for Beginners, written by Emeriswitch. 1,000 Wonderful Herbs and Mushrooms, by Felita Spall. Magic Potions and Potions, by Asenajig Monsters and Their Origins, written by Nutzkaman. The Dark Forces. A Guide to Self-Defense, by Quentin Trinbu. Other Equipment, a wand, a large pot, made of tin, standard size 2, a set of glass or crystal small medicine bottles, a telescope, a brass balance. Students can carry an owl, a cat, or a toad. Parents are reminded that first-year students are not allowed to bring their own flying brooms. It's true, this is true. Tiara gave a dazed glance to the owl standing on the table, causing the owl to flap its wings in frustration. However, Tiara's daze lasted only for a moment. Immediately flipping out a blank piece of paper, he picked up his pen and wrote. Dear Professor Dumbledore, I am very honored to be admitted to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry to learn magic. After finishing this paragraph, Tiara thought for a moment and continued writing. But there is no one around me who has studied magic, and although I have a great longing for magic myself, I have never been in contact with it, so I neither know how to prepare the items on the list nor how to go to Hogwarts. If possible, if it's convenient for you, could any faculty member who happens to live or work in London also take me into the magical world of wizards? Student Tiara Wu folded this reply and handed it over to the owl. But the owl did not open its mouth, but waved its wings and let out a cry, then stared at Tiara with a very humane gaze. Oh, yes, you must be hungry when you fly over, Tiara realized when she saw the owl's movements. Coincidentally, I have your favorite delicacies here, said Tiara as she opened the door to the next floor and ran down. When she returned, she was holding a slightly damaged and plump gray mouse with a tail in her hand. This is the test rat caught by Tiara in the attic while practicing the floating spell. Now that it has been proven that the Helis potion is indeed effective, it is no longer needed. Instead, let's give it to the hard-working messenger as a snack. Gee. The squirrel was caught in its hand and screamed frantically. Unfortunately, Tyola was holding onto the back of his neck, and even if it tossed and turned, it couldn't bite Tyola. Tiara handed the squirrel to the owl's mouth. The owl looked at the big mouse and then at Tiara. He pecked at Tyola's hand, then picked up the reply letter and flew away without looking back. Owls don't like to eat mice. Looking at the back of the owl, Tiara said with some confusion. Do you want to eat something cooked? End of this chapter. Chapter 6. The Essence of Magic. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. The Essence of Magic. After seeing off the owl, Tiara lay back in bed. Knowing that she was in the world of Harry Potter and there was another safer and safer magical path, Tiara became less urgent about Merlin's dangerous and thorny path. And with the guidance of a teacher, why bother exploring on your own? If you're not careful, you'll end up with another finger. Tiara rested her hands behind her head and began to daydream. I don't know if Hogwarts is really the same as in the movie, I don't know which college I will be assigned to, and if it were to Gryffindor I wonder if I will encounter the famous Harry Potter. Harry Potter Harry ha shit. In 1991, it happened to be the year Harry Potter enrolled. If this was really Harry Potter's world, then he would definitely meet him this year. First grade and Voldemort compete for the Philosopher's Stone. Second grade soul fighting equipment, snake fighting monsters. In third grade, there was no danger, and the only seemingly dangerous Sirius Black was actually a kind-hearted person. Then in fourth grade, Voldemort was resurrected with full blood. Fifth grade, reunite with the Death Eaters. Sixth grade, seventh grade, began to openly eliminate Muggle seeds. Muggle seeds. Tiara's parents, whether in this lifetime or in the previous lifetime, are all non-magical individuals, and he can be 100% certain of this. That is to say, Tierra is the purest Muggle species. It's too pure to be pure anymore. At the thought of this, Tierra flipped out of bed and sat back at her desk. I still need to learn, these useless knowledge still need to be learned. Tierra picked up her pen again and wrote and drew on another blank piece of parchment, continuing to build the second layer of spiritual wall. This is a magic developed by Merlin in his later years that can block the erosion of external gods. It uses the moment when Helis' potion enhances spiritual power to carve this magical configuration into the spiritual dimension. This spiritual wall has a total of 7 layers. Before drinking the Horus potion, Tierra had already completed the analysis of the first layer of the wall. From the first layer to the third layer, Tierra could only gradually deepen the connection between her spiritual dimension and spiritual dimension, and strengthen her control over her magic. The fourth to sixth layers can increase the spiritual dimension, which is the accumulation of magical power. The seventh layer requires the help of an old ruler to make a qualitative change in one's spiritual and spiritual dimensions. As for the construction of magic models according to Merlin's notes and the description in the Black Magic Principles section of the Book of the Dead, the essence of magic is dimension. In the physical sense, three-dimensional is the direction of space. In the sense of magic, the 3 dimensions are material, spiritual, and spiritual. The material dimension refers to the direction of length, width, height, and space in traditional physics. The spiritual dimension is the source of wizards' magic, also known as Hogwarts' magical talent, and the spiritual root of cultivators. The spiritual dimension is the essence of all intelligent life thinking. Wizards are 3-dimensional creatures that exist simultaneously in the material, spiritual, and spiritual dimensions. The 3 dimensions of material, spiritual, and spiritual are interrelated and mutually influential. Wizards generally require the assistance of wands and spells when using magic. The wand is a fusion product of material and spiritual dimensions, which can help wizards stabilize magic and more easily unleash the power of spiritual dimensions. And spells are simplified models of spells. Any type of magic that exists today is simplified from ancient ritual magic. And everything that ritual magic does in the material dimension, such as jumping gods, building stones, lighting bonfires, and even blood sacrifices, is all aimed at building spell models in the material world, and then mobilizing the power of the spiritual dimension. These rituals have been simplified step by step, and now, most magic has become so simple that it can be released simply by reciting spells and a wand that can communicate spiritual dimensions. Of course, neither spells nor wands are necessary. As long as a wizard can accurately construct a magical model from a spiritual dimension, they can cast spells without the need to recite them. Other wizards chose to use lengthy and complex ancient texts such as Niven, while Merlin chose a simpler construction method. Mathematics. Merlin lived rationally on Earth for over 700 years, from the early 11th century to the end of the 18th century. During this long period of vitality, Merlin met a genius named Newton. From then on, Merlin changed all the magical configurations to multivariate calculus. Fortunately, Tierra was a science student in her previous life. Due to the postgraduate entrance examination, she did not completely forget the advanced math, and due to the limitations of Merlin's ancient thinking, all the magic configurations he provided were only basic calculus configurations. In addition, a simplified version of ancient texts such as Niven spells was added. At this stage, Tierra's learning is not difficult for her. In recent years, Tierra has not only been used to build the first layer of spiritual walls, but also attempted to build several small magic spell models while studying Merlin's notes, such as Flash Curse, Flame Curse, Repair Curse, and of course, his floating spell to guide magic. In the process of constructing these small spells, Tierra further deepened her understanding of the entire 3-dimensional theory of magic. After all, although Merlin's notes are available, due to the era he lived in, many descriptions left Tierra bewildered. Although there were many books in this library, Tyra dared not flip through them and has only read the Black Magic Principles and Alchemy Introduction sections of the Book of the Dead to this day. According to the description in the Dark Arts section of the Book of the Dead, the latitude of living beings is not completely unchangeable. Two-dimensional organisms can evolve into three-dimensional organisms, and three-dimensional organisms can also evolve into four-dimensional organisms by obtaining coordinates of divine dimensions. The Muggle in the mouth of a wizard is the type of two-dimensional creature that only exists in the material and spiritual dimensions, lacking a spiritual dimension as a source of magic and the ability to influence both. Therefore, Muggles cannot use magic, nor can they see magical creatures such as Dementors that only exist in the spiritual and spiritual dimensions. But Dementors, through their spiritual dimension, can in turn absorb the soul of Muggles. Muggles can easily gain magic by constructing a magical configuration in both the material and spiritual dimensions, resonating with a mysterious existence in the spiritual dimension, and then engaging in spiritual connection to obtain the spiritual dimension. This mysterious existence can be a powerful demon, a pagan deity, an extraordinary wizard, or even a crazy exorcist. Of course, this kind of spiritual connection is extremely dangerous. Powerful demons will take the opportunity to occupy your body and descend on the material dimension. Pagan gods and wizards will turn you into puppets, while external gods Tiara has already experienced it, and the little thumb on her left hand still feels empty. Tiara even suspected that she might simply be a Muggle, relying solely on the spiritual connection behind the 7 chapters of the mysterious Lord's secret scriptures to obtain the spiritual dimension. After all, he had never received any admission letter from a magic school in his previous life, and there was nothing unusual in his memory in this life, such as the occurrence of a magical explosion. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Snake Man Tune. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Snake Man Tune. 2 days later, Tiara received a reply. This time, it was a shiny gray owl that flew in, dropped the letter, and flew away. Dear Mr. Wu, we are delighted to receive your reply and sincerely welcome your joining. We believe that you will have an unforgettable and happy 7 years at Hogwarts. For the situation you mentioned, we have already made arrangements. Our lovely gamekeeper, Rubus Hagrid, will arrive at the attic of your old town on the evening of July 31st or the early morning of August 1st to take you to the wonderful wizarding world. Perhaps there will be a young wizard of the same age as you at that time. Respected Vice Principal Maliva McGonagall, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. P.S. Mr. Hagrid is a tall but kind-hearted, furry gentleman. Please don't be afraid and have a pleasant time together, Hagrid. The little wizard accompanying him must not be Harry Potter, right? Well, it should be. On July 31st, 1991, Harry Potter's 11th birthday, Hagrid will give Harry a cake and punish the Dursley cousin who has been bullying Harry. Then Hagrid will take Harry to the Broken Cauldron in London, enter Diagon Alley through the back wall of the bar to buy magic supplies, and also take away the Philosopher's Stone stored in Gringotts. The Philosopher's Stone. Tyra remembered the semi-finished Philosopher's Stone that Merlin had left in the library, unsure if there would be any difference between the two. But there are still 2 months left. We need to prepare well. Although the first 4 grades may be thrilling, nothing is absolute, and the most dangerous is the 2nd grade. Snake monsters, mirrors, roosters, realgar. If possible, we could buy incendiary bombs, sulfur bombs, and smoke bombs, which would be even better. Tiara silently calculated that the 1st grade Voldemort was okay, but also shocked but safe, and there was Dumbledore watching. No matter what, it was impossible for Voldemort to harm him, a newly enrolled Muggle wizard. However, the snake monsters were not necessarily the same, as they indiscriminately slaughtered Muggle seeds. Although the original plot was, none of them died inside, but that doesn't mean he's as lucky as those few. Thank you, Merlin, said Tiara sincerely. On the day of receiving the acceptance letter from Hogwarts, Tiara returned to the library and copied the content from Merlin's collection of hippo clay tablets. Because it was written on a clay board, there was not much content on it. It only covered the learning methods of the snake man tune and the cultivation techniques of snake monsters, as well as some imperfect magic and curses created during the hippo experiment. There is still half of the mud board that Tyra cannot recognize due to its fracture and severe wear, and there is no record of this part in Merlin's notes. It is only known that it is a large-scale magical ritual. The learning of Snake Man tune not only requires certain magical skills and language talents, but also requires the cooperation of magic potions. It goes without saying that magical skills and language talents have been blessed with the knowledge of the great race of Isis. As long as he comes into contact with the text, he can synchronously read the language. The pronunciation of the serpent accent itself is based on a variant of ancient Greek. After caressing the hippo stone slab, Tiara had already learned ancient Greek. Although it was not yet proficient, it was still sufficient to learn the serpent accent. The rest is a magic potion called Hydra poison. Hydra poison, as the name suggests, is a poison, but not lethal. It is a byproduct of Hydra's research on the blood curse, which only transforms the user into a humanoid ferocious beast within 24 hours. However, if taken together with the snake bile of the magical animal scorpion-tailed snake, this poison will only make the user mute for a few months. After a few months, with appropriate learning and practice, the user can initially master the snake man's cavity. Most of the medicinal ingredients in Hydra poison are found in Merlin's garden, which he confirmed by climbing out of the pyramid in the past 2 days. Even the missing desert thorn flowers, fairy wings, ghostly-faced swan pupae, African tree snake skins and key parts, as well as the silver shells of feathered snakes, should still be available in ordinary potion shops. The set of hardcover printed magic textbooks collected by Merlin, which had already fallen to dust, had already been flipped through by Tyra. After reading the hippo stone tablets, she flipped through them again. She saw these ingredients in familiar potion formulas such as the living hell soup, compound soup, and animagus potion. It seems that they are not particularly precious things. The only issue is the snake gallbladder of the scorpion-tailed snake. In the 1645 version of the magic biography, this snake has been hunted and endangered due to its remarkable and powerful detoxification effect. It is unknown whether it has survived after all these years. It's best to learn the snake-like tune, but if you don't know how to mention Yella, you have to consider the items he listed earlier. Among them, the Realgar mirror rooster goes without saying. Smoke bombs can block the snake monster's gaze and seize the opportunity to escape. According to the movie's setting, the snake monster's sense of smell doesn't seem to be very good. As long as its line of sight is blocked, its probability of escaping greatly increases. The incendiary bomb can instantly generate high temperatures. According to the description of the Heapole slate, the snake monster not only fears attack calls, but also fears flames during its childhood. However, as it ages, the snake monster becomes less sensitive to flames. Tiara speculates that this may be because as the snake monster's scales thicken, the temperature of ordinary flames is difficult to affect its nervous system through the thick armor. But unlike incendiary bombs, aluminum thermite can reach a high temperature of 3,000 degrees in an instant, enough to burn steel. Moreover, the flesh and blood snake monster, even though it is a magical creature that will not die, can still cause certain obstacles to the snake monster and give it time to escape. The configuration of aluminum thermal incendiary bombs is not difficult, and even Tiara herself has tried several times. Of course, it is not used to smash people, but to ignite aluminum powder and iron dioxide with matches in the laboratory. In response to school policies, she popularized chemistry experiments to high and middle school students around the university. Iron dioxide, aluminum powder, and magnesium strips used for ignition are placed in glass bottles, but it is difficult to control the ignition time of magnesium strips. So it is necessary to use a basic sulfur bomb mixed with sulfur, saltpeter, and carbon powder, with a wet towel soaked in combustion aids as the lead wire. Tie a piece together, once encountering a snake monster, ignite it and throw it together, generating heat that can melt the metal. Although Tiara can now be considered a wizard, including the curse of worms, she has gained considerable self-protection power compared to her peers. But as a science student in his previous life, Tiara had a habit of using technological thinking to solve problems. Or to put it another way, when facing unknown dangers, only when holding the power of technology in her hand can Tiara feel safe. This is a concept accumulated over the past few decades, and it cannot be reversed by mastering a few magic spells in a short period of time. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Hagrid. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Hagrid. 2 months passed quickly. In preparation for the upcoming thrilling and exciting Hogwarts life, Tiara resigned from her job as a front desk receptionist at a Chinese restaurant. To be honest, when faced with kind-hearted couples who lend a helping hand during their toughest times, Tiara couldn't speak up, so she decided to be honest. It was just a bit difficult to explain, even though Tiara showed the couple the Hogwarts admission letter and her abilities such as the floating curse, flash curse, and flame curse. The kind Chinese lady and honest Chinese man were not at ease and insisted on accompanying Tiara to meet the hunting ground guard Hagrid on July 3rd and 11th. However, he was rejected by Tiara's righteous words. Hagrid was a half-giant, nearly 3 meters tall, and his whole body was furry like a big brown bear. When they were scared out of heart disease by watching Tiara display the floating curse flame curse, they were saved by Tiara's curse worm's ability. Whenever Hagrid, like a big bear child, does something out of line, Tiara will have to save him again. Although Tiara refused the couple's suggestion, it still gave him a very heartwarming feeling. In fact, this Chinese couple knows their thoughts on Tiara. The poor couple's child passed away early, and over the past few years, they have treated Tiara as their own child. If it weren't for Tiara's respectful but distant attitude, the couple might have already made a formal request to adopt him. But in Tiara's heart, his parents have always been alive, in another parallel world. The rapid and heavy knocking on the door came from the first floor of the small building, and looking down from the window of the attic where Tiara was located, one could see a furry giant and a thin and weak little boy. "Hello, is anyone there? I'm Hagrid, the Game Ranger at Hogwarts. May I ask if Tiara Wu is home? Please wait a moment." Tiara shouted from the attic and quickly ran downstairs. "Hello, I'm sure you're Tiara Witch, right? I'm Rubus Hagrid, the gamekeeper of Hogwarts, and this little wizard is Harry Potter, your classmate." The furry Hagrid said in a muffled voice, while leaning to reveal a Harry Potter following behind him. "Hello Hagrid, hello Harry." I said. Tiara came up and hugged Hagrid, then hugged Harry again. Although Hagrid is a gamekeeper, he doesn't have any foul odor on his body. Instead, he has a scent of leather, grass, and gasoline mixed together. And Harry carried a hint of licorice, cake, and a hint of sweat on his body. Harry seemed very uncomfortable with such hugs, and when he made physical contact with Tiara, he seemed to stiffen for a moment, but still mechanically hugged back. After feeling Harry's discomfort, Tiara silently let go of her embrace. Take a closer look at Harry. Harry looks very similar to Daniel Radcliffe in the movie, but he is even thinner and shorter than him in the movie. He is wearing long sleeves and canvas pants that have been worn out, his hair is messy like weeds, and his glasses on the bridge of his nose are a bit twisted, as if he is often hit. "Hello, Tiara. I was supposed to take you to Diagon Alley to buy things, but it's a bit late now, can you let us stay for one night? I don't need a bed, just a spacious space is enough. I'm really sorry, I was planning to take you to Diagon Alley this afternoon, but Uncle Harry moved to a small island where it's really difficult to find, so it's been delayed until now." "No problem," Tiara replied happily. He had already anticipated this situation, whether in movies or novels. Hagrid would take Harry away in the middle of the night, and Diagon Alley was open during the day, so Hagrid and Harry would definitely find a way to sleep outside for the night. Normally, they should have spent their time on the sofa of the Dursley family or in the guest room of the Broken Cauldron bar, but due to the sudden addition of a tiara to pick them up, Hagrid is likely to open up for the night. Anyway, in the perception of most wizards, an uninhabited Muggle house is equivalent to a free hotel. After Tyra agreed, Hagrid and Harry entered Tyra's small building on their own. Harry still feels a bit reserved, but Hagrid completely regards this place as his own home. With a wave of the pink umbrella in his hand, he ignited the fireplace located on the first floor, took off his wet fur coat, and laid it on the ground in front of the fireplace. "I'll just sleep here. Can you find a bed for Harry? Poor little Harry has been sleeping on the sofa at the despicable Dursley's house for several days." "No problem," Tyra said as she held Harry's hand. "You can sleep with me. My bed is in the attic, which is very big." "Ah. But will this affect you?" said awkwardly. Harry has always lived under the shadow of his cousin Dursley, having had such close contact with others outside of being bullied, and has never received any kindness from his peers. This kindness makes Harry feel both uncomfortable and warm. "My bed is very big," Tyra continued to release her kindness. "You don't have to worry about affecting me. I grew up in an orphanage, and my parents were killed by bad people. Children of the same age as me in the orphanage have been bullying me. I'm glad to meet a friend like you." We're friends, right?" "Me too." Harry almost shouted out, and the shyness and unfamiliarity he had when we first met seemed to disappear in an instant. Facing this boy who had a very similar experience to himself, Harry felt some kind of touching resonance. If Harry were Tiara, he would know that this kind of emotion is called friendship empathy. In unfamiliar environments, people tend to choose to make friends with people who have similar experiences, and building initial topics based on their shared experiences can help break the awkward atmosphere of the initial meeting. This kind of empathy for making friends is useless in adult social situations, because even if there is no common topic between adults, they can still come up with an awkward conversation. But this empathy for making friends is very effective for children. This is a small technique that Tiara summarized during her internship as a teacher and taking care of relatives and children. Similar experiences build empathy, which helps to bridge the gap between her and the children. Harry now is a child who lacks love very much. He should be said to be a rich child who lacks love very much. Although it may be a bit embarrassing to say, Tiara is really short of money. Whether it is the subsequent Hercules potion, Hydra poison, or scorpion tail snake gall, they all require a certain amount of financial support. Merlin was up, and at this moment he encountered the lonely, pitiful, and helpless young Tycoon Potter. Ding! Tiara seemed to hear the sound of Jean Jalom rubbing against her ear. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Poor boy, Harry. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Poor boy, Harry. Hey, Tyra, have you slept yet? Harry, hiding under the covers, lightly touched Tyra lying next to him. No, what's wrong, Harry? Tyra whispered back. How could I possibly sleep while you keep tossing and turning next to me, Tyra said silently in her heart. No, it's nothing, I just can't sleep. I didn't disturb you, did I? It's not okay, Harry, I can't sleep either, Tiara replied. It's simply unbelievable, like a dream. I can't believe there really is magic in the world, and there are magic schools, Harry sighed. Hee, it's like a dream, and even after waking up for a long time, it's still very moving. Tyra joked, but unfortunately Harry didn't understand this advanced joke. By the way, Harry, you don't have to speak so quietly. Hagrid lives on the first floor, and we're in the attic. You can speak as loudly as you want, and it won't disturb Hagrid. Oh, okay. Harry's voice increased a lot, but it was still very light, like a kitten barking. The habit of living under someone else's pen for many years is not easily reversed. Although Harry has moved away from his uncle's closet, he was still the little boy living in the closet until he saw the piles of gold in the Gringotts vault. Faced with Tyra, who had a similar experience, Harry quickly fell in love and poured out everything he had just learned from Hagrid about the magical world and his parents to Tyra like a bean. And Harry's miserable life at his aunt and uncle's house over the past decade. Although Tiara has long known about these situations through the Harry Potter series of books and movies, she still appears to be cooperative and interested. "There are quite a few things to buy in the admission letter," sighed Tiara. "Yes, Hagrid will take us to buy it tomorrow morning, I can't wait anymore," Harry said excitedly. "Harry, do you have money?" Money. I don't have it," Harry said with a drooping face in an instant. "Uncle Dursley will definitely not give me money to attend magic school." "Don't worry about Harry," said Fintilla as she jumped out of bed, smeared black and opened the third drawer of her desk. She took out an old leather bag and placed it in front of Harry under the moonlight shining through the skylight. "What is this?" Harry jolted and heard the sound of metal crashing inside. "Money," Tyra said as she opened her cowhide bag and poured out a dozen neatly arranged banknotes according to their denominations, from small to large, as well as a few sparkling gold coins. Harry's eyes seemed to straighten. He had never seen so much money in his life, whether it was the thick dozen banknotes or those slightly old but shiny gold coins. "Tiara. This is money, Harry. This is the money I saved up from working after running out of the orphanage at the age of 6, said Tiara. The banknotes inside the bag were approximately £1,100, consisting of thick bundles of pounds with denominations of 10, 20, and 50, which he had saved up over the years not only by working in restaurants but also performing magic on the streets. These funds were originally intended to save up for his plane ticket after the age of 12 when he reached the age of being able to fly alone. If this world and the world he traveled through were parallel worlds, he would still have a large number of relatives in his homeland and a property. Even if he went back to eat from 100 families, it would still be better than wandering alone in a foreign land. But Hogwarts' admission letter brought him another option. "I hope this money will cover our tuition fees," said Tiara. "Wait, Tyra, our tuition fees?" Harry asked in shock. "Yes, Harry, our tuition. If you don't have the money, I can help you pay for it. I have some savings from working outside these years, It's much better than your situation. If it's not enough, I'll have to sell these few coins." Tiara said with a mournful expression on her face, "These few coins are the only relics left by my parents." "Oh no, Tiara, I can't take these money. These money." Harry quickly refused. "No, Harry, we're friends, aren't we?" Tyra said, "Friends should help each other." "But Tiara, this is too much, I can't afford it." "No, you still have to pay," Tyra said silently in her heart. "I don't want you to return it," said Tiara. "I've always hoped to have a good friend since I was young, from an orphanage." Then Tyra added fuel to her tragic experience and recounted it again. She lost her father and mother in her childhood, was bullied in the orphanage, and finally managed to escape to the streets. She often went hungry and even snatched food from wild dogs until she met a kind Chinese, and of course, the middle part of the experience was fabricated. When Tyra escaped from the orphanage, although she was only 6 years old, she relied on adult thinking to live comfortably among the small group of homeless children, without any hunger or competition with wild dogs. In fact, at that time, Tiara had already gathered over a dozen street children from London to form an organized and disciplined small group, helping gangs and rogue organizations on the streets of Old and Lower London deliver messages or move prohibited items. Occasionally, there were also premeditated organized fraud or theft. Due to the pressure of life, during the first 2 months of not being able to find a job, Tiara was smoothed out by all the edges of his previous life that belonged to scholars. This heartless transformation can be considered the only difficult experience in Tiara's wandering life. But this also comes only from spiritual torment and self-blame, and material hardships. The wandering life of those few months left many dark thoughts in Tyra's heart. Only children hold on to past sad experiences and self-blame. Adults should learn to use the empathy of others to earn enough profits. In the end, Harry still didn't accept Tyra's pounds and coins, but Tyra's open-hearted help was enough to make Harry feel grateful. He lay in bed at night with his nose twitching, clearly wrapped in a blanket and crying silently. This gave Tiara a faint sense of guilt. He doesn't really want to help Harry, even if Harry is the protagonist of his favorite series of movies and novels in his previous life, he can't help him without reservation. What Tyra wants is Harry's help. Not only from Harry's financial background, but also his connections and fame. In his previous life, when he read those cultivation novels, the 4 essential factors of wealth, couple, law, and land were essential. Learning magic is the same. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Broken Cauldron Bar. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Broken Cauldron Bar. Children, wake up. We have a lot of things to buy today. Hagrid's rough roar ran through the thick 2-story floor next to the first-floor closet and into Tyra and Harry's ears. Harry sat up with drowsy eyes, perhaps due to the excitement of entering the magical world, or perhaps because he had gained the happiness of a good friend like Tyra. Harry tossed and turned until 2 or 3 o'clock last night. So when he was awakened by Hagrid's piercing voice, there was still a bit of an unreal feeling. It seems like everything that happened yesterday was just a dream. In the dream, his parents were no longer failures who achieved nothing, but heroes who fought against evil forces in the wizarding world. His parents' friends appeared on his 11th birthday, not only bringing him his first sweet birthday cake, but also taking him away from the Dursley family to make his first friend in his life. God, if this is a dream, please don't make me wake up. Harry silently prayed and opened his eyes. The morning sun shone through the skylight of the attic, and a young man with black hair and eyes sat at an old wooden table, writing and drawing. Seemingly sensing Harry's gaze, Tyra lifted her head from the pile of mathematical formulas on the table. Get up. Tyra smiled at Harry, revealing 2 pointed little tiger teeth, reminding him of the little fox he saw at the zoo on Dudley Dursley's birthday. He also smiled at him in the same way, with a hint of cunning and cute smile. Get dressed and wash up quickly, said Tiara. Today we're going to Diagon Alley. It wasn't until Tyra threw the clothes to Harry that he realized the clothes in his hand were not the clothes he had worn when he arrived, which were full of holes and dust, but a clean set. Clothes he had never seen before. I woke up early today and had nothing to do. I'll help you wash your clothes, said Tiara with a smile. Your outfit hasn't dried yet, let's wear mine first. Both Tyra and Harry are 11 years old, and because they work in a Chinese restaurant, Tyra is not worried about food and drink compared to Harry. Moreover, under the special care of the owner, Tyra even eats a bit too much nutrition. Therefore, Tyra is not only half a head taller than Harry, but also slightly stronger than Harry. Harry has no problem wearing his clothes. Harry pinched the clean and slightly soapy clothes in his hand and quickly put them on his head. Today is a big day for Harry. If there are options, he doesn't want to wear a set of clothes full of holes into the magical world. Harry and Tiara, dressed up, were taken by Hagrid to the Broken Cauldron Bar. That was a dirty and small bar, sandwiched between a huge bookstore and a record store on the other side, only 2 streets away from the attic where Tiara lived. If Hagrid hadn't pointed it out, no one would have noticed such a rundown and small bar. In fact, Tiara passed by the entrance of this bar several times, and every day he had to pass through this street to walk back to his attic in the old city from the Chinese restaurant where he worked. Every time Tiara passed by, she only noticed the bookstores and record stores on both sides, and never noticed the Broken Cauldron Bar between these 2 buildings. It's hard for most people to notice, Hagrid blinked at Tiara. The first time a little wizard and muggle come, unless someone brings them, they won't be able to see the Broken Cauldron Bar, let alone go inside. Harry and Tyra were pushed into the Broken Cauldron by Hagrid before they had a chance to speak. As a place that has been very famous both in the wizarding world and in Tiara's previous life, this place is really too dark and dirty, far dirtier than what is portrayed in movies. Tiara thinks that any third-tier restaurant in any third-tier city in China is cleaner than this. There are several old ladies sitting in the corner of the Broken Kettle bar, holding small glasses and drinking sherry, one of whom is smoking a long cigarette bag. A little man wearing a top hat is chatting with a bar owner with almost bald hair and a shrunken walnut-like appearance. As soon as they entered the door, the chattering of voices suddenly stopped. It seems that everyone here knows Hagrid. They smile, wave, and whistle at him. Is it the old rule? Hagrid. A hunchbacked man sitting inside the counter wiped his glass and looked at Hagrid. Oh, no, Tom, I really want a drink, but I'm doing something for Hogwarts. Hagrid patted the bar owner's shoulder with his giant palm, almost crushing him. You know, I never drink when I do things, that's why Dumbledore trusts me, Hagrid said proudly. Oh my goodness, the bar owner turned his attention to the two little boys following Hagrid after Hagrid refused. When he saw Harry's almost emerald green eyes and a lightning-shaped scar hidden in his messy hair, he screamed like a cat with its tail stepped on. Oh, Merlin's up, this is probably. The Broken Cauldron bar was silent for a moment. Oh my. The bar owner seemed to realize his mistake and quickly whispered, Harry Potter, oh Merlin's beard, it's Harry Potter. An honor. The bar owner quickly came out from behind the bar and ran towards Harry, grabbing his hand and tears streaming down his eyes. Welcome back, Mr. Potter, welcome back. Harry didn't know what to say. Everyone is watching him. The old woman smoking a long cigarette bag kept smoking, but she didn't even realize that the cigarette bag had gone out. Hagrid began to giggle, and the clattering sound of the chair falling one after another echoed. All the wizards in the bar, old and young, men and women, and all kinds of strange people surrounded Harry in order to come over. If it weren't for Tyra pulling Hagrid's coat sleeve all the time, he would probably have been squeezed out of the circle. Harry had never seen such a scene before. When he regained his senses that day, he suddenly found himself shaking hands with the people from the Broken Cauldron bar one by one. I'm Coterie, Mr. Potter. I can't believe it. Finally, I've seen you. I'm so honored, Mr. Potter. I'm so honored. I've been looking forward to shaking hands with you for a long time. My heart is pounding. I'm so happy, Mr. Potter. It's hard to say how I feel. My name is Diego. I've seen you before, Harry shouted as Diego became too excited and his hat fell off. Once in the store, you bowed to me. He actually remembers. Diego shouted excitedly to everyone present, did you hear me? Harry Potter, he remembers me. So Harry shook hands again and again. Cordelie, the first wizard to shake hands with Harry, always runs over and demands to shake hands with him again. A pale-faced young man walked over with a very nervous expression, and one of his eyes kept twitching. Professor Quirrell, Hagrid nodded slightly, taking it as a greeting. Harry, Tiara, let me introduce you to Professor Quirrell, who is your teacher. Bo Potter, Professor Quirrell stuttered as he grabbed Harry's hand, seeing you has a kind of indescribable joy. Tiara stood next to Hagrid and noticed that Quirrell was holding Harry's hand, wearing a pair of black gloves. At this moment, a strange thought suddenly flashed through Tiara's mind. If Professor Quirrell were to take off his gloves and shake hands with Harry now, wouldn't the first installment of Harry Potter end prematurely? What kind of magic are you teaching, Professor Quirrell? Black, defense against dark magic, Professor Quirrell said vaguely, as if he felt it was better not to mention it. You have already used. There's no need to learn, right, Mr. Potter. Quirrell suddenly burst into a nervous burst of laughter. You're accurate, ready to go by what you need, right? Just right, me too. If you're going to buy it, buy a book about smoking and vampires. But the others won't let Professor Quirrell keep talking to Harry endlessly. It took Harry about 10 minutes to get rid of them. Amidst the incessant chatter, Hagrid raised Tiara's voice and called Harry, "It's time to go, there's still a lot of things to buy." "Let's go, Harry, don't make Tiara wait too long." Coterie shook hands with Harry for the last time, and Hagrid led him through the bar to a small courtyard surrounded by walls on all sides. "There is nothing here except a trash can and some weeds." "Sorry Harry, Tiara. I was originally planning to take you to breakfast at the Broken Cauldron bar, but their mashed potato sandwiches are so well made that even Hogwarts house elves don't have this kind of skill." Hagrid grinned at Harry and Tiara, "But now we can only go to Diagon Alley and have some, that delicious sausage hasn't sold out yet." Hagrid pulled out his pink umbrella as he spoke. End of this chapter.